So here we are again, another Islamic terror attack followed by the usual useless platitudes from our traitor class. British Home Secretary Amber Rudd tells us we will not be divided by terror and that terror will not succeed. And we'll hear a lot more of these defeatist lies over the coming days. What would these people have said and done in 1940 if we had allowed British cities to be bombed by the Luftwaffe whilst we resolutely stated we are not at war, that the shattered and burning and undefended British cities were only becoming stronger, that the Luftwaffe was an organisation of peace? Well, the answer's obvious. We would not have become stronger. We would not have become more unified. We would have lost. We would have been massacred. We would have been wiped out. Terror and violence works. When the Muslim prophet Muhammad claimed he had been made victorious through terror, he spoke from experience. And when he stated, "I have been ordered to fight all men until they testify there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger," he laid down a simple law, which is that Islam must fight and fight and fight until Islam becomes the dominant ruling ideology. Prime Minister Theresa May and Home Secretary Amber Rudd might pretend that Britain is unbowed. They might pretend that Muslim terror attacks only make us stronger. But the depth of their denial and their blatant lies is driven only by their fear of Islam. The only reason they claim Islam is a religion of peace is because they fear Islam. The only reason Muslim gang rapes were covered up for decades is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason British school children visit mosques but rarely Hindu temples is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason halal meat is sold unlabelled in our supermarkets is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason the violent and supremacist screeds within the Quran and the Hadith are never examined, are never placed under public scrutiny, are never called to account for the actions of Muslim terrorists is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason our mosques and madrasas are never prosecuted for inciting racial and religious hatred is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason hundreds of trained jihadis, quite possibly including the Manchester bomber, are allowed back from Syria and into Britain unopposed, unchecked, is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason our prisons are being taken over by supremacist Islam is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason known Islamic supremacists from abroad are allowed to visit Britain, whilst human rights activists like Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller are barred from coming to Britain, is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason massive electoral fraud carried out by British Muslims is rarely investigated is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason decent, moral, humane people like me are labelled as racists and Islamophobes by our traitor class is because our traitor class fears Islam. The only reason I am kept away from all mainstream media outlets is because our traitor class fears the truth of Islam as much as they fear Islam itself. The only reason the massive rise in Muslim demographics is never examined, never projected forward to see just how near in the future young Muslims in Britain will outnumber young natives is because our traitor class fears Islam. And the only reason why Britain will slowly morph into an Islamic state ruled by Sharia law well before 2050 is because our traitor class fears Islam. Terror works. We are not made stronger or more unified by it. Terror allows Islam to slowly and incrementally seize power unopposed. And the more Muslims there are, the more they will demand and the more terror they will utilise. Britain is like a speeding locomotive hurtling toward the cliff edge. The driver is a Muslim. The people stoking the fire, the people building the steam, the people lying to the sleeping passengers and telling them they will all be fine are our combined members of our traitor class. They're our politicians, our journalists, our civil servants, our top policemen, our judges, our teachers, and their combined power, which they utilise to shoot down truth-tellers like me, makes the locomotives dive into the abyss an absolute inevitability. The passengers on the train need to wake up. They need to understand that events are speeding up, that civilizations do collapse amidst violence and carnage, that wars and civil wars are not over just because one side chooses pacifism and appeasement. They need to understand that when in the 1960s 100,000 Muslims became 200,000, the danger levels were low. But when the 4 million Muslims today become 8 million, 16 million and 32 million by 2050, then our civilization is over. Our culture's over. Our way of life is over. Our rule is over. And a new rule will begin. They need to understand all these things, but the majority of them won't, because our traitor class will not allow them to know. We're in a battle, not just for Western civilization, but a battle for our lives. And more importantly, a battle for the lives of our innocent children and grandchildren. And if you want to join the battle, then you need to join my party, Liberty GB. And I'll say one thing here, and it will not be something you'll hear from any other political party, and it's this: Islam mortally threatens us, and Islam will not reform. So if we are to survive, Islam must be removed from Britain. There is no other option. If you agree with this, then please join Liberty GB, and let's start to build a resistance. Let us all start to build the revolution. Let us gather the numbers to overthrow the traitor class. Let us build the numbers and take it to the streets in order that our traitor class's fear of violent and illiberal Islam is matched by their fear of us, who only wish to live as our ancestors lived, in peace and harmony. And we must overthrow them, either through the ballot box or by genuine revolution, because without a cultural revolution, a thinking revolution, or even a physical revolution, we have nothing in our future, nothing to hand down to our children but lies, submission, civil war and carnage. So please, join Liberty GB today, because without your numbers, we're powerless. With your numbers, we become powerful. Let us resist. Let us win the greatest battle of the 21st century that we are now facing. Thank you.